There's a list I keep on the back of an old gas receipt, stuffed in my wallet behind expired insurance cards and a crumpled coffee loyalty punch card. It's not a grocery list, not goals or dreams or quotes from dead philosophers. It's called Things I Did Right That She'll Never Know. I wrote it the night she told me she wanted a divorce. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded, went out for milk I didn't need, sat in my car for 3 hours, and scribbled that list with frozen fingers while listening to the engine tick in the silence. Number 1. I canceled the hotel room I never told her about. Number 2. I returned the necklace I couldn't afford. Number 3. I didn't tell her boss what she said about him in the hot tub that night. I wrote 37 things. Then I ran out of space. Not ideas, just space. When I got home, the bedroom was already cleared. She had packed faster than I ever saw her move in years. The closet door was still swinging. She left a sticky note on the fridge that read, "Don't make this hard. It's better for both of us." No signature. Just her lipstick stain on the counter like a crime scene. I wish I could say I reacted nobly. I wish I could say I threw myself into hiking or therapy or French baking. I didn't. I slept in the laundry room for 2 days because I couldn't walk past our bedroom without my legs shaking. I ate canned soup with a plastic spoon. I didn't shower until my neighbor called in a wellness check. And then, I disappeared. Quietly. I didn't run away because of her. I ran because I hated what I had become, a man who stayed in the wreckage long after the fire was out. The cabin came later. Not out of romance or symbolism. I found it on a sketchy listing site. No photos. No promise of heat. Just secluded. Dry. One wrote in. For $100 per month. That's all I needed. It was smaller than I expected. Everything inside creaked or buzzed. I didn't mind. It matched me. I brought only what mattered. My wallet, my gas station list, a backpack, and something I hadn't touched in years, a sealed manila envelope. Inside was the last secret I had ever kept from her. A secret she thought was buried, forgotten, erased. I never meant to open it again. But the night the generator failed and the wind started clawing at the walls, I lit a candle and tore it open. And that was the beginning of everything. Because the name inside that envelope, the person it belonged to, was sitting at my table when Callie showed up uninvited 1 month later, frozen on the threshold like she'd seen her own funeral. When she walked into the cabin, I could hear her boots sticking to the floorboards, the kind of sound made when snow melts into mud and regret. Callie didn't knock, didn't call. She just opened the door like she still owned the silence in my life. But she froze after 2 steps. Not because of me, because of the woman sitting at my table. The same table I had sanded and stained with my own hands just 2 weeks ago. The only piece of furniture in the whole place that didn't wobble or hum or moan in protest. The woman sitting at it had her elbows resting on the wood like she'd never left. Like she was always meant to be there. Callie's jaw clenched first. Her hand tightened around the doorknob. And then she asked the question I knew was coming the second I saw her shadow on the porch. What is she doing here? But it wasn't said in fear. It was said in recognition. Because the woman at my table had Callie's face. Not a twin. Not a cousin. Not some sci-fi clone thing. I mean her face, in a painting, sitting across from me. Finished that morning. Propped up on the table like a dinner guest I hadn't quite dismissed yet. Callie looked at the canvas, then at me, and finally, with the first crack in her voice I'd heard in years, she whispered, "Why would you paint that?" And I said the one thing I had been waiting 30 days to say. Because she was the last honest version of you I had left. Silence. Even the wind outside stopped, like it was curious where this was going. You want the truth? Callie was never cruel. Not in the traditional sense. She didn't scream, didn't throw things, didn't hit below the belt. Her damage was subtler, softer, like a pillow held over your face while she smiled and said, "Just rest, love. It's okay." She erased me one small act at a time. First, she asked me to cancel a trip. Then, she told me not to wear certain clothes. Then, she laughed when I said I wanted to start painting again. Said the art world already had enough. Emotional men who think struggle makes them deep. I stopped bringing it up after that. But I never stopped sketching. I just started hiding it. And one day, when I found the manila envelope, an old keepsake box from before we were married, I realized something. The only version of Callie that ever looked at me with truth in her eyes was the one I drew 10 years ago, when we still sat on the kitchen floor and talked about things like Iceland and ghost towns, and what color we thought our fears would be if they had a shape. That version of her? the one in charcoal and smudged ink. She loved me, so I painted her again. Day after day, memory after memory. The way she held a mug with both hands. The way her shoulders used to relax when she thought I wasn't looking. The curve of her mouth when it wasn't forced into something performative. And somehow, as I painted, I let the real Callie go, brushstroke by brushstroke. So when she stood there, a ghost facing her own echo, she didn't know what to do. Her legs carried her in despite herself. She touched the edge of the painting and whispered, "I don't look like this anymore." I didn't say anything. She turned to me, suddenly smaller than I remembered, and asked, "Why now? Why after everything?" And I replied, "Because it took you leaving for me to remember what I liked about myself." The silence between us was loud. Not angry, just stunned. She wasn't used to me having boundaries. She wasn't used to me not chasing her. That's when she saw the second plate on the table. Her eyes shifted. Her voice hardened. "Who else is here?" I didn't answer. Not right away. I watched her heart try to do the math. And when the front door creaked again behind her, just a little, she spun around like she was preparing for a fight. And what she saw? That's what broke the part of her that thought she was still in control. Because the person standing there, she knew them. Intimately. Professionally. And secretly. But more on that in part 3. Callie's eyes narrowed like a blade. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She just stared, through the doorway, past the edge of the old wood frame, at the woman stepping inside with snow on her coat sleeves and frost on her lashes. And then she said her name. Not a whisper. Not a question. A statement, sharpened by disbelief. "Maribel." The woman froze. I stood still, leaning back against the kitchen sink with my hands in the pockets of a sweater Callie never liked. A calm washed over me. The kind that comes right before lightning hits the tree you warned everyone about. Callie took a step back, suddenly aware of how small the cabin was. Her fingers brushed the edge of the painting she'd just admired, the ghost of her former self, and it felt like even that version of her recoiled at what walked in. "What is she doing here?" she asked again. But this time, her voice broke into something sharp, territorial. "This is a joke, right? You're playing games now?" Maribel didn't move at first. Her hands were still on the doorknob, her boots melting a small puddle into the wood floor, but her eyes, they were calm, measured. She didn't flinch the way Callie did. She didn't fall into old patterns of apology and blame. She just glanced at me and said gently, "Do you want me to wait outside?" "No," I replied. She walked into my space uninvited. If she doesn't like who's here, she can show herself out. Callie didn't expect that. In fact, I think for the first time in our entire marriage, she realized I was capable of defending myself. And she hated it. Let me rewind, just enough to explain. You're probably wondering who Maribel is. Or maybe the better question is, who she was, before everything went sideways. 2 years ago, I was working freelance design gigs on the side. I'd done a branding consultation for a mid-sized event company in Portland. Corporate stuff mostly, seminars, retreats, networking workshops. Their operations manager at the time? Maribel Stroud. Efficient, quiet, always on top of her schedule, never flirted. Just got the job done. Callie worked in the same company, different department. At the time, she said she barely knew Maribel, one of those clipboard women, she called her. Someone who schedules people's dreams into color-coded time blocks. But that wasn't the whole truth. Not even close. I didn't know it then, but 6 months before our divorce, Callie had submitted a complaint to HR. Against Maribel. It never escalated. No one told me. But the complaint mysteriously disappeared, withdrawn after a week. Why? Because it was fake. Callie had accused Maribel of hostile communication and undermining her reputation. Claims that weren't backed by a single piece of evidence. I only learned about it after I left the house, when Maribel reached out with a message that started like this. "I think we need to talk. Not about work. About your wife." So yes, the woman at my table, the one Callie tried to professionally sabotage and personally destroy, was now sitting in my cabin, sipping tea from the only clean mug I owned. And I hadn't planned it that way. I didn't orchestrate some revenge fantasy where I lured Callie back just to rub her nose in it. But fate has a funny way of giving you theater tickets to a play you never thought would be staged. Callie clenched her jaw and took a single step forward, like the cold outside had finally caught up to her spine. "Is this why you disappeared?" she hissed. "You ran off to shack up with one of my enemies?" I looked at her long and hard. "You called her your enemy." I call her the first person who told me the truth about you. That landed like a slap. She stared at me, and for a second, just a second, her eyes looked wet. But I didn't move. Because Callie had cried before. She knew how to use tears like smokescreens. I'd fallen for that trick too many times. Not again. Maribel stood still behind her, watching, not smug at all. In fact, if anything, she looked disappointed. Sad, even. Like she had once admired Callie too, and was mourning the version that had never existed. You lied about her, I continued. You weaponized your insecurity and tried to destroy someone because she didn't play along with your little office theater. You said she humiliated you. What really happened was she caught you lying. And I wonder, how many others did you lie to over the years? Callie's face changed. Gone was the defensiveness. What replaced it wasn't regret. It was panic. You don't understand what she did, she snapped, desperate now. She twisted everything. She made me look. I raised a hand to stop her. Callie, you made yourself look that way. And that's when she dropped the act. The calm melted off her like wax, revealing the rage beneath. So this is it. You run off to the woods, play tortured artist, and shack up with some morally perfect desk jockey from my past? I stepped toward her. Not aggressive. Just close enough to make her look at me instead of the past. No. I rebuilt myself from the version you couldn't handle. I gave myself a chance to become someone you wouldn't recognize. And you know what's funny? You still came back. She didn't respond. She looked at the door, then at Maribel, then at me. And for the first time since she walked into my life 7 years ago, she had no words. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because what neither of them knew, not Maribel, not Callie, was that the real reason I moved to the cabin had nothing to do with either of them. And that secret was locked in a drawer 10 feet from where we stood. I could have ended it there. I could have let Callie storm out, let the silence swallow her pride, and never answered another question again. But I've learned something out here, in this cabin, in this isolation, in the weeks since I became the man she never thought I'd be. Secrets don't stay quiet forever. They rot. They grow teeth in the dark and wait. So I walked past both women, past the painting, past the table, past the icy tension still fogging up the windows, and headed toward the short hallway by the wood-burning stove. There was a drawer beneath the bench seat by the wall. Most people would think it was for firewood or blankets. But that drawer hadn't held warmth in a long, long time. It held the one thing Callie never imagined I kept. Something she thought was erased, burned, buried under time and shame. And to be honest, I almost forgot it was still in there. Until that night 2 weeks ago, when I had a dream so vivid I woke up with blood in my mouth from grinding my teeth. I opened the drawer. Callie didn't follow at first. Neither did Maribel. But when they heard the soft click of the old brass latch, I heard a shift behind me. I felt their curiosity crawl up the hallway. I pulled out the folder. It wasn't thick. Maybe 8 pages total. A few photos. A flash drive taped to the inside cover. The kind of contents that don't look like much until you understand what they mean. I turned around slowly, holding it like it was made of glass. You remember when you asked me to delete everything? I asked quietly. Callie's face went pale. Ezra, don't. You remember, I said again, louder this time. How you sat next to me, holding my hand, telling me it was the only way to heal. Maribel looked between us, confused. She hadn't seen the folder before either. But she could feel it, the weight of something unspoken pressing into the walls. Callie took a step back, then another. That was years ago. We agreed. You agreed, I snapped. I complied. I threw the folder down onto the table between them. The contents spilled just enough to reveal the top photo. A grainy security cam still, time-stamped. 2 silhouettes. A parking garage. Her hand in someone else's jacket. The one moment that had nearly broken me. Not because she cheated, but because she lied for a year about it. Convinced me I imagined it. That I was spiraling. That I needed help. She'd played the concerned wife so well, I thought I was going insane. She called it emotional paranoia. But it was real. I never told her I requested footage from the garage. I never told her I hired a private firm to recover deleted texts from the old phone she left behind. I never told her that I knew who the man was. Not some stranger, but a family friend we'd had over for Thanksgiving. The same man she called like a brother. You remember that weekend retreat? I asked coldly. When I called you 3 times, and you said you were in a signal dead zone. When I sent flowers and you didn't get them. Callie didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth was already bleeding all over the table. Maribel took a step forward and looked down at the photo, then at Callie, then at me. Her voice was calm, but steady. You kept all of this? I did, I said. Not out of revenge. Not because I wanted leverage. I kept it because for so long, I wasn't sure if I was crazy. I needed something to hold on to. Proof that I wasn't just a weak man inventing ghosts. Callie finally found her voice. Bitter, cracking, defensive. You said you forgave me. You said it was over. No, I replied. You begged me to say that. So I did. Because I was afraid that if I didn't, you'd leave. But guess what? You still left. She didn't deny it. Because she couldn't. And for a moment, a rare, fragile moment, she looked exactly like the version of her I had painted on the canvas earlier that week. Not beautiful, not confident, just unfinished, raw, unmasked. Maribel looked down at the spilled documents, and I could see something shift in her. It wasn't judgment. It was recognition. She'd seen the manipulation. She'd lived adjacent to it. You brought me into this to expose her, she asked, turning to me. No, I said quietly. I brought you here because you were the only person who didn't treat me like I was disposable. Callie let out a scoff. And what? Now you two are what? Trauma bonding over how awful I was. You think that's healing? I stepped forward, past the table, past the wreckage of her accusations. No. Healing is waking up in the morning without feeling like I have to earn the right to exist. Silence. This time, it wasn't awkward. It was truth settling into every crack of the cabin. And then, just as I thought she might turn and leave, finally, permanently, Callie did something I didn't expect. She walked up to the table. She picked up the flash drive. And without looking at either of us, she said, I hope you enjoy being the victim, Ezra. But don't forget, you were never innocent either. Then she dropped the flash drive back on the wood, turned around, and walked out into the snow. She didn't slam the door. She didn't look back. And yet I knew that wasn't the last time I'd hear from her. Because people like Callie, they never let go unless they're forced to. And unfortunately for her, I was done being silent. 2 days passed after she left. It snowed that night, so thick the trees vanished behind a curtain of white. I didn't see footprints when I woke up, no tire marks, no sign that anyone had ever been there. Almost like the cabin swallowed what happened and pressed reset. But inside, nothing had reset. Not for me. Not for Maribel. She stayed the night, not in my bed, but on the couch, bundled in the same quilt I hadn't washed in weeks. Neither of us said much. It wasn't tension. It wasn't awkward. It was just quiet, the kind that sits heavy on your chest when too many things go unsaid in the same room. We spent most of the next day chopping firewood and fixing a leak in the roof I'd been ignoring. She brewed strong tea, read some book on boundary psychology, and let me be still. It was the first time in years I'd been around someone who didn't need me to perform. I didn't know her jokes. I didn't know her comfort. She didn't ask me to pretend I was okay. But the silence didn't last. The mail came, which was strange, because I don't get mail here. I never updated my address. I never gave forwarding instructions. The only people who know where I am live 3 counties away, and even they don't have the exact GPS location, just a vague, Ezra's off the grid now shrug. So when I opened the rusted mailbox at the end of the long, icy road and saw a plain white envelope with my name written in blue ink, no return address, no postage, no markings at all, I felt my stomach drop. I didn't open it right away. I brought it inside, placed it on the table next to the cold mug of tea, and just stared at it. Maribel watched me from the couch. She didn't ask. She could see it on my face. It was Callie's handwriting. Every loop. Every perfect slant. She used to write letters like this when we dated. Tucked them into my books, left them under my windshield wiper, once even mailed one to my office before she showed up at lunch, and kissed me like we were 19. But this wasn't one of those letters. It wasn't sealed. I opened the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. It read, You always said you hated being blindsided. So I thought I'd give you time. There are things you don't know. About me. About Maribel. About the cabin. Then one final line. Please don't ignore this. Someone's watching you. That was it. No signature. Just my name at the top and an unspoken question hanging over every word. I looked up at Maribel. She was reading my face carefully now, waiting. Like she knew something was wrong before I could say it out loud. I handed her the letter. She read it once. Then again. Her eyebrows drew together. She didn't speak right away. She just held it like it might change if she blinked. "Do you believe her?" she finally asked. I didn't answer. Because the truth is, I didn't know. Later that night, when I went out to refill the firewood rack, I found something half buried in the snow just beside the porch steps. A black glove. Not mine. Not hers. Just one glove, leather, expensive looking, and soaked through. Like someone had dropped it running, or left it behind deliberately. I scanned the woods. Nothing. No prints. No movement. But the silence had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt held, like the trees were listening too carefully. I brought the glove inside. Maribel was already standing at the door like she knew. "That yours?" I asked. She shook her head. "But I recognize it." She walked over slowly, picked it up, turned it in her fingers, and exhaled like she'd been holding something back for a long time. "Ezra, there's something I didn't tell you. Something about the company." I stiffened. "What do you mean?" "There's a reason Callie tried to ruin me," she said. "It wasn't just personal. It was about access. About who knew what. And more importantly, who kept records." Turns out, Maribel had been the unofficial whistleblower inside the event company. Nothing flashy. No lawsuits. But she had stumbled on a few irregularities. Vendor kickbacks, false invoices, client data being sold behind the scenes. She raised quiet alarms. The company did what companies do. It silenced her. Made her feel paranoid. Discredited her among colleagues. And Callie? She'd helped. Willingly. Because she stood to gain from keeping things buried. "You were collateral," Maribel said quietly. "You were just a story she could control. A narrative she could keep neat." I felt sick. And now someone's probably trying to find out what you know. Or what I've told you. And if Callie's warning you. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up by the fire, door bolted, flashlight in one hand, the letter in the other. I watched the shadows crawl along the walls and wondered, was this all still about betrayal? Or had I stepped into something much deeper? Either way, the next morning, I knew what I had to do. Because if someone was watching me, it was time I looked back. At 4:07 a.m., I opened the door and stepped into the dark with a flashlight, a crowbar, and the kind of fear that doesn't make you shiver, it makes you quiet. Maribel was asleep on the couch, or pretending to be. Either way, I didn't tell her I was going. Not yet. The trees were silent, but the snow was different. Heavier. Warmer somehow. It was the kind that melted just enough for footprints to matter. I wasn't looking for a trail. I was looking for something off. A broken branch. A line of disturbed snow. A shift in the shadows that didn't belong. And 30 yards behind the cabin, past the pile of logs I hadn't touched in weeks, I found it. A shoe print. Fresh. Not mine. Not Maribel's. A boot. Heavy tread. Deeper on the heel, like whoever wore it was limping or dragging one leg. The path curved behind the slope toward the old fire road no one used, the one that led to a caved-in hunting shack half a mile out. I followed it without hesitation. Not because I was brave. Because I was done waiting to be the hunted. I walked through the trees with the flashlight low, crowbar in one hand, crunching as softly as I could. The cold bit through my gloves. My breath fogged in front of me like a signal flare. The print continued, now joined by another, smaller, lighter, like someone else had followed the same path recently. My cabin is remote. GPS barely holds. This wasn't some casual hiker. This was targeted. When I reached the edge of the old shack clearing, I stopped. There was light. Faint. Flickering. Like candlelight behind a tarp. And I heard it, the low hum of a radio. Not music. Just static. Like someone had turned the dial between stations and left it that way on purpose. I crouched low, heartbeat wild in my chest, and eased toward the collapsed front of the building. Part of the roof had caved in, but a makeshift lean-to was set up against the remaining wall. Someone had dragged in crates, tarped the roof, stacked snow around the gaps like insulation. Someone had been living here. Recently. And then I saw the photographs. Pinned to the wall with rusted nails, protected under torn plastic, were prints of me. In the woods. At the mailbox. Chopping wood. Feeding the stove. Sitting on the porch in the evening. Someone had been watching me for weeks. I reached out slowly, heart pounding, and pulled one photo off the nail. It was dated. In pen. The same pen that had written the letter. The same ink. Same pressure. But what made my blood run cold wasn't the image. It was the one word scrawled across the bottom in neat, small letters. Target. I turned toward the crates, suddenly desperate to find answers, anything. But what I found instead was worse. One of the crates was filled with documents. Company files, contracts, invoices, names, some redacted, some circled in red, but all of them tied to Callie's employer, the one she quit just before she asked for the divorce. I flipped through quickly, hands numb, eyes trying to focus in the candlelight. Then I found it, a file folder labeled in all caps. M. Stroud. Maribel. Inside were internal emails, surveillance logs, notes, priority, keep in proximity, monitor interactions, isolate if possible. They'd been following her, too. I backed away, fast, nearly slipped on the ice. That's when the radio stopped. Dead silence. Then a soft crack in the trees behind me. I spun around, crowbar raised, but saw nothing. Just branches. Until I noticed it, a third set of prints in the snow. Bigger, fresher, heading straight toward the cabin. I ran, harder than I had in years. My lungs burned, legs seizing up with every step. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because someone was ahead of me now. And Maribel was alone. When I reached the cabin, the door was open. Wide. Snow in the entryway. Light still on. But no sound. Maribel. I shouted, stepping in, heart slamming against my ribs. Maribel. No answer. I dropped the crowbar, grabbed the flashlight again, swept it across the room. Nothing. Then I heard it. The faintest rustle. Not from the couch. From the trapdoor in the kitchen floor. The one I hadn't used in weeks. The one that led to the root cellar. I moved slowly. No weapon now. Just instinct. I crept toward the door, reached for the latch. Then it burst open, and Maribel climbed out, coughing, covered in dust, holding a flashlight and a file clutched in her hands. She saw me, gasped. He was here, she said breathlessly. I locked myself down there. Ezra, he left this. She held up the folder. It had one word written across the front in shaky handwriting. Confession. And in the corner? Callie's initials. The folder was shaking in Maribel's hands. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. There's a strange kind of silence that happens when truth finally shows up. Not the loud, messy kind with tears and screams, but the still, surgical kind. The kind where all the oxygen gets sucked out of the room because part of you already knows what's inside. Maribel placed the folder on the kitchen table with a care I didn't recognize in her. Not fear, not caution, something more sacred. Like she was handling someone's diary. Or a will. I pulled out the single page inside. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't even typed. It was a voice-to-text transcript. A dump from some software. Messy, filled with mispunctuations, half-finished sentences, but real. The title at the top said only, Audio Memo, Confidential. Caller ID, C. M. Timestamp, for 17 a.m. Recipient, unknown. I scanned the first few lines. Then I read it aloud. Both of us standing like statues under the overhead light as the snow tapped faintly at the windows. I don't know how to start this. It doesn't matter anymore. Ezra's gone. I told him I wanted a divorce, and he said works for me. He didn't even try to fight it. That's when I realized I was the villain. Not in the dramatic sense, but in the quiet way. The way people rot a marriage without cheating. But I did cheat. And that's not even the worst part. Maribel looked at me, but I couldn't look back. I kept reading. I got involved in something I didn't understand. It started as favors. Small things. Forwarding documents. Approving invoices I didn't recognize. The company had outside interests, shell firms, side investors. I wasn't supposed to ask questions. I was supposed to keep people quiet. That included Maribel. At that, Maribel stiffened. I could feel her body lock up just a few inches away. But I kept going. She asked the wrong questions. Started logging inconsistencies. I filed a complaint to discredit her before anyone took her seriously. It worked for a while. Then Ezra started asking questions too, about money, about where I was, about the retreat. So I staged the fight, the one that led to the first separation. It gave me enough distance to cover things up. But he didn't stop. He dug. He kept digging. My throat dried up. Because I remember that fight. I thought it was over me forgetting to clean the gutters. I thought it was about chores. About stress. But it was engineered, a smokescreen to buy her time. She planned that night. The worst part, the transcript continued. I think he still loves me. Even now. Even after everything. But I'm scared. Because I think someone is watching him. And it's not the company anymore. It's Trevor. The name hit me like a shovel to the chest. I dropped the paper. Maribel blinked. Who's Trevor? I didn't answer. Not right away. I backed up and braced myself against the counter, my heart thudding loud enough I swore she could hear it. Trevor's my brother, I said finally. Half-brother, technically. We share a father. Maribel stepped closer. Why would she mention him? And suddenly everything came back. The weird silence between them when they first met. The time she said, "Your brother has strange eyes." The way Trevor always changed the subject when I brought up Callie, like he was protecting something or someone. Then I remembered the voice I heard in the background of one of her old speakerphone calls. Back when we were still pretending things were fine. That voice wasn't a coworker. It was his. I went to the closet and yanked open the storage trunk I hadn't touched since I moved in. Inside were old photos, cords, chargers, my childhood baseball glove, and an envelope marked Private, Family. Inside, I found what I was looking for, a letter from my father's estate. One I never read carefully at the time because I was too grief-stricken. I had filed it away in the someday pile. I scanned it now, line by line, and there it was. Trevor's name listed under a separate trust. A secondary beneficiary, connected to an LLC, one that matched the name of a shell company mentioned in Maribel's file. I dropped the letter, looked up at her. They weren't just involved. They were working with him. Maribel whispered, Callie and your brother? It was never just about the divorce, I said, sick to my stomach. It was about removing me from the equation. The cabin felt suddenly smaller. Too small to hold the weight of that realization. I backed up toward the window, looked out into the night. And that's when I saw it. A car, parked at the bottom of the hill. Lights off, engine silent. But it was there, watching. The car didn't move. It sat like a shadow on the hill, half buried in snow, lights off, windows dark. I couldn't see the plate. I couldn't see if anyone was inside. But I knew. Deep down I knew. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't a coincidence. This was him. Trevor. Maribel stood behind me, barely breathing. She hadn't spoken in minutes, but I could feel her mind racing just like mine. The puzzle pieces were all over the floor now, scattered, ugly, sharp. And the picture they painted was more betrayal than I could have prepared for. Callie hadn't just left me. She'd tried to erase me. With my own family's help. I locked the door. Not because it would stop anyone. The latch was older than the cabin itself. But because it gave me one more second to think. Maribel moved to the far window, peered through the curtain. He's not moving, she said quietly. What's he waiting for? A mistake, I replied. Or an invitation. I grabbed the crowbar again, set it by the table, then walked to the drawer and pulled out the old prepaid flip phone I kept in case the landline went dead. I hadn't used it in months. I powered it on and typed a single message. If you come near this house, I will go public. All of it. Every file, every name, every dollar. I sent it to the only number Trevor had ever given me. Then I shut off the phone. We waited. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. The car still didn't move. But then, the headlights blinked once. Twice. Then it reversed slowly down the hill and disappeared into the tree line like it had never been there at all. Maribel exhaled shakily. Do you think it's over? She asked. No, I said. But I think they just realized I'm not the same man they tried to erase. It took a week for the calm to settle. During that time, Maribel and I contacted a journalist she trusted, someone outside the influence of the old company. Together, we prepared a quiet leak. Not dramatic, not vengeful, just evidence. Clean and verifiable. Then we sent it anonymously. No signatures. No glory. Just the truth, handed to people who could use it right. By the second week, arrests began. Not big names. Not yet. But the ripples started. A forensic audit was launched. A second one followed. 2 board members resigned under pressure. Trevor's name came up in a leaked deposition. And Callie? She left the state. No one could confirm where she went. But the last email I ever got from her, weeks later, sent from an untraceable account, simply said, I was wrong. You were never weak. I hope you build something better now. Something honest. Goodbye. No threats. No venom. Just a whisper in digital ink. And then silence. So what came next? Nothing dramatic. No revenge monologue. No courtroom standoff. Just healing. Maribel stayed. Not because we were in love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But because she felt safe, and I did too. We made a deal. No labels, no pretending, no rushing. Just truth, something both of us had been denied for too long. I painted again. I finally finished the piece I started all those weeks ago, the version of Callie that once existed. I didn't destroy it. I didn't burn it or bury it. I kept it on the cabin wall as a reminder. Some people leave so you can find the parts of yourself they smothered. Some endings aren't punishment, they're permission. This morning, I woke up before sunrise. Made coffee. Opened the door. Let the cold bite my skin without shrinking from it. And as I watched the light break through the trees, I realized something. This story didn't end the day she left. It began the day I stopped waiting for her to come back.